thank you very much for that introduction, and it's a real privilege to be with everybody this morning, and also just a warm welcome and a thank you to Mr. Matabani, the BBCBE leadership, and as all the names that Mukhadi has mentioned, which I'm going to just hang on to her coat. All protocols observed. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here this morning. And it's always a pleasure for me to talk about a topic that is so close to my heart. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about, 5G and the potential of 5G. It's like this controversial topic, and you'll remember how much fake news there was around 5G, how many concerns. There was a time, and there probably still is many people that think that 5G brought COVID, and but at the same time, 5G poses tremendous opportunities, and just we're going to focus a little bit more on that. Most days you'll find me talking passionately about the digital divide. Mukhadi sort of touched on that, and it's a grave concern, and it should be a very big concern for all of us. We have to find ways of bringing everybody into the digital economy, and that's the ecosystem. And as much as we often refer to rural areas, and we must also remember that right close to where we live, there are underserviced areas, and we need to find common ground with government and with private sector and with big corporates to bring together a ecosystem that we can serve people in underserviced areas. I think the grave concern for us right now is that the digital divide is only going to exponentially increase, and COVID-19 have shown us just how big that digital divide is So this morning we're going to talk a little bit about the 5G economy and what that means for job creation and how we can all participate in the 5G economy, and how do we get ourselves ready for this 5G sort of revolution, as I like to call it, that is about to hit us. And I think over the last while, globally, the telecommunications sector, especially since the onset of the pandemic, has achieved dramatic growth. And I know it's difficult sometimes when I speak to young people, because I know that you don't remember the days of 1G and possibly 2G and 3G. But over the last decade, we've seen rapid growth in the whole growth within all the different generations of mobile technology that's taken place. And as Mukhadi has, sort of touched on, fiber plays a very important role in mobile technology. So mobile technology, I always say there's a lot of wires in the wireless communication that we have in our mobile phones, because of course, fiber optic infrastructure provides all your backhaul to, your mobile towers. The telecommunications industry is extraordinarily different from other infrastructure, and although there's some similarities in some areas where there's similar problem, it's very different to the traditional construction. It requires construction, but of course we can all agree that it's very different in the sense that it has this overall impact over all the economies within society. So the digital economy touches on agri and retail, tourism. So it plays a bit of a cross-the-board role over the economy. And for that very reason, I think especially in the pandemic, we've seen it now, for the first time, the digital economy is getting the attention that it deserves. So in the past, nobody asked questions when they used their mobile devices, because work from home was not such a big thing. We relied on communication, and telecommunications in general was important to us, but we never asked these massive questions. We just pick up our phone, and when we're in a Wi-Fi network or even at home, our biggest concern is, access to data. But we never really thought about the building of these networks and the opportunities that create. We've certainly seen an awakening of that and the potential of the whole digital economy. And for the first time in all the years that I've been involved in this sector, it's really heartwarming for me and encouraging for me to see the amount of attention that government is paying towards this sector, and establishing task team. One of the projects that we're currently busy with is working with Operation Vulindlela to talk about what barriers do we need to remove and how do we lay this path so that we can continue to roll out a telecommunications infrastructure. And of course, now with 5G on the horizon, we believe, and we say this, without reservation, that we believe that the 5G economy is going to be as significant as the first industrial revolution, and the adoption of electricity and automobiles. But it's also, it's set to sort of disrupt a number of industries that's going to be affected. So 5G, because of what it promises, the low latency and the high throughput, won't just be an evolution in technology. It's set to rapidly revolutionize the way that we've done business. And over the next couple of years, we're going to see how this disruption is taking place. We've already seen some form of slower adoption and digital transformation taking place. But I think over the next couple of years, that's going to exponentially increase. And we must remember that digital transformation has a snowball effect. So the more you adopt, the more it grows. And we can expect to see significant growth in this. So now more than ever, I really believe that it is critical for governments to understand how this fundamental shift in technology is going to impact the broader economy, especially at a moment when COVID-19 has caused significant digital disruption and massive job losses, which is nearing Great Depression levels. But there's certain questions that we need to ask, that we fundamentally have to answer. And for me, these questions are more important to the youth than almost any other sector that we can address. So the first thing that we need to understand is how many jobs is going to be lost due to the 5G growth and the adoption of automation and digitalization. And secondly, we need to understand in which sectors those jobs are going to be lost. We can accept that there's going to be mass job losses, but we have to know where those losses are going to be so that we can start circumvent that. But also, on the other hand, we know that 5G is going to create a mammoth amount of jobs. And what we need to do is we need to understand what those jobs are and how we can participate in them. We have to ask questions such as, will they be focused around traditional urban cities, as we understand, urban cities, Joburg, Cape Town, Durban, etc., or are they going to create new opportunities geographically across the nation? We've seen the impact of work from home, which is brought on by, the availability of high-speed broadband. And now we need to ask ourselves, if we're going to see new jobs created, does that mean that we can work from anywhere? Can I go back to the village? Do I have to stay in the city? Where are these jobs going to be, and what are they going to look like? And then, of course, we have to understand what kinds of jobs those jobs are. And we need to also understand whether we're ready to capitalize on these jobs. Is our education system in pace with what these jobs are going to look like? Are we creating the right skill out there that will enable us to use the technology and actually create this digital society that we really need? We need to ask whether we should be providing job training to ensure that we can meet these opportunities. But I think all of this comes back and circles back to, ultimately, do we have clear strategies in every department that is going to be affected, that clearly seek to understand the future of our sectors and how we can capitalize on this? And already we know that the 5G revolution has begun. Globally, large mobile operators are building out networks. Network companies are competing already for the best skill And product leaders are hiring 5G system architects, radio access network engineers, 5G solution architects, and technical managers in the 5G space. For me, some of the concerns about this is that as the rest of the world, because the rest of the world is ahead of South Africa in the adoption of 5G technologies, there's a very big concern that they will be taking away from our skill pool because of the shortage of skill globally and because of the deep demand for skill. And again, here's where we need to look at. We need to develop a strategy to retain our own skill. Thankfully, we've already got a lot of demand in South Africa, but we need to make sure that the so-called brain drain doesn't continue and that we retain and even attract skill. So where does it all come from? So for the young people around you, the whole liberalization of the telecommunications market in South Africa has accelerated the growth of the industry in the past decade. And the original liberalization, I don't know if anybody can remember the old, we used it the telecom days, where there was like one monopolistic, company that sort of owned the whole sector. And subsequently, there was a couple of court cases, and today we've got this very big, this big sector. And although we're not where we'd like to be, we've seen that it has led to some lower prices, higher quality of service, and a move towards service-based product offerings, away from the historical state sort of a state-controlled sector that we used to have. And that's given rise to also the rise of the fiber optic infrastructure sector. And we've seen that in a mere decade. I mean, the fiber sector is just a little bit more than 10 years old. It's created thousands of jobs. And today it's a solid sector, it's a sustainable sector, but it's a really exciting sector because of the densification requirements. So I didn't touch on this, but anybody that wants to know a little bit more about the Digital Council can have a look at our website, and I'll put it up again at the end of our conversation. But the rise of the sector and FTTH and fiber to the business penetration in South Africa versus the rest of the world, is still slower. So we'll get there. We've had to overcome a lot of challenges in the last years, but it's showing growth and adoption. And at a global level, 2 years ago, South Africa made it onto what is called the global panorama, one of the ways in which they measure the adoption of fiber services globally. And there's a strong linkage between the deployment of fiber optic infrastructure and economic development of a particular country. So South Africa is getting there. We're deploying fiber. It's taken us a lot of time. I think what slowed us down was the first 5 years of the decade that we've been, that the sector has been busy. But as more and more people started understanding the value of fiber optic infrastructure and how it fits into the bigger picture of broadband services, we've seen a lot more relaxation and people understanding, and wayleaves being produced better and faster, etc. Then so some of the leading markets if we just look at Africa, is obviously South Africa, where we've got already 762. This is dated March 2020. So in the pandemic, this has rapidly increased and the adoption has almost doubled. But Mauritius is a leading nation. Kenya has got a strategy, and they're a good entrant into this race. Tanzania, and even Zimbabwe have seen a substantial amount of fiber optic infrastructure being deployed. Very slow still, but it's getting there. And then, of course, just to have a quick look at sort of the growth of 2G to 5G, we can see that 3G and how particularly 2G is declining. So it's important to note that there's still many areas in Africa that only has 2G technology. And then, of course, there are still, the growth in some 3G services. Operators feel that they haven't really, 4G has still got a little bit of legs in them, and many of them have in very recent years, invested heavily in their 4G markets. But to move on, sorry, that's the wrong way. Why does all of this matter? So significant growth in the sector has meant that some of these network deployments have been pushed deeper out. And we're now seeing that a lot of tier 2 and tier 3 towns are already getting fiber. You know, in the past, smaller towns wasn't even considered. But now if you go to a town like Polokwane and Mbombela, eMalahleni, even smaller towns like Bethlehem and Ermelo, all have already access to fiber. So those fiber might be concentrated to the business districts, but still it has significant impact. And ultimately, once you're there, you can start building out and go into lower income areas. And this growth is sort of driven by the need to geographically build out routes to smaller towns. There's, of course, pent-up demand for high-speed broadband, especially now with work from home. We've seen the release of additional spectrum, and the adoption of next-generation mobile networks will, of course, also contribute to this demand. And all of this creates and opens doors for new business ventures. So to put it into context, in India, for instance, in 2020, more than 60% of companies that were registered with saying that their job description will be developing applications in IoT, artificial intelligence, and other technology applications. And in South Africa, we've seen over the last decades many startups that are focused in the fiber optic industry, which has opened windows for a lot of entrepreneurial effort. And we've seen phenomenally strong entrepreneurs develop. But what we've also seen, and it's really saddening, is that we've seen a mass failure on some of the startups that couldn't get out the blocks. And we clearly understand why that is, and it comes back again to skill. So being technically competent in your subject matter does not equate to being competent as an entrepreneur and understanding the challenges that we will have as entrepreneurs. So it's very important that we need to develop entrepreneurial skills in the telecommunications sector to help meet all of these demands and shift our goals. We believe that there's a significant opportunity, and on a global scale, we realize and we are concerned about the amount of jobs that we're going to lose. So we know that about 1.8 million jobs globally is expected to be wiped out by the adoption of 5G technologies. Having said that, we also know that about 2.3 million jobs will be created by the 5G economy. But for South Africa to capitalize on that, we need to focus on a new word, and that new word is reskilling. So just to put it into context, if we talk about reskilling, think of a traditional teacher. Somebody went to university, they became a teacher many years ago, 30 years ago. They're now standing in front of a classroom teaching kids. And although the way that they were taught and trained in the first place, there's nothing wrong with, suddenly they catapulted into a digital world. Children need to use tablets. Children, we have digital whiteboards. So suddenly our teachers need to be reskilled. And that's the truth for many people. If you think about agri, suddenly we are using machinery that we never used before. So even before 5G took hold, we started seeing bots replacing customer service representatives. But we're happy to say that 5G is going to create a lot of jobs. We need to make sure that our people are ready and that they can capitalize on the jobs that will be available. So just briefly, we know that some areas are more at risk of losing jobs. Agri, of course, over the last decade, we've seen how machinery has taken over the roles of human. If you think of harvesters and pivots and, how digital packaging rooms have become. Transport, of course, we think that driverless cars is very futuristic. And although I agree with you, just think about it. Already a long time ago, you had a thing like cruise control in your car, or your parents might have, or a rich uncle. And you could, on the long road, press a button. So think of autonomous driving as an extension of having a cruise control. I was fortunate enough to be taken for a spin the other day in a car that already blocked you from changing lanes. So it could sense that you were in a particular lane. And this is not it just was a normal vehicle that is available for purchase today. We need to think of tourism, where AI and bots are replacing humans. In the retail sector, we all know what's happening with e-commerce. So e-commerce is just bursting out of the seams. And I believe that soon you'll be able to do a body scan with your mobile phone to help you choose your clothing size better, and to help you, just from your online procurement, to help you fix that. So if we think of all these sectors that's going to be affected, and I mean, we haven't even spoken about things like big data. We have to appreciate that there's a tremendous amount of opportunities for our youth. We don't have a crystal ball to know what the future is going to look like, or how tech is going to transform this. But we need to make sure that we start looking towards the future, that we understand what that future, read up, make it your goal to understand what the future look like, and make sure that you skill yourself and take people along on the journey. Thank you very much for having me, Nonkululeko. Sorry if I ran over time.